Hello again. Somebody expressed the view the other day that this channel must be a full-time job for me. Not a bit of it. I still find time to write at least a couple of non-fiction books a year, as well as other stuff for magazines, websites and elsewhere. I am now back in the business of writing westerns as well, which I thought I had finished with. I've written 50 or 60 westerns of this kind. Some viewers have seen these in the library and turned from them in disgust, presumably. Town Called Innocence, Marshall Flynn's Pilgrimage, Jed Harker Rides Out. I write some of these under my own name, but also loads of improbable pseudonyms like Harriet Cade, Brent Sadler, Brent Larson, Fenton Sadler, names like that. The British market for these things is fading, even in libraries. But the other week I was approached by an American publisher and offered a contract to turn out a few more. Now, there are two cardinal rules when you're writing as a job, that is to say, making a living. And the first is that you should never turn down work if it's likely to pay. The second rule is, of course, that there is no such thing as bad publicity for a writer. In the description to this video, I give a link to one of the saddest things viewers are likely to see in a long time. It is a photograph of a bunch of old guys, half of them wearing Stetsons, who are the authors for the Dusty Saddle publishing house in the United States. Scroll down through this depressing crew and you will find me. I have agreed to write 7 novels, delivering one every 40 days. When I told my wife this, she misheard me and thought I had agreed to write 7 books in 40 days, which she thought might be a bit of a stretch. But one novel every 40 days, that's nothing at all. The great secret about writing that authors are desperate to conceal is that there is nothing at all clever about it. It requires no more talent or intelligence than any other craft, whether carpentry, music, bricklaying, thatching or metalwork. Once you have mastered it, you can turn out any kind of writing, from advertising copy to novels. Just as a carpenter can use his skills to make a door or a chair or table, and a builder can construct a grand house or a little shop. Writers are in general rather a stuck-up bunch, and they try to make out that what they are doing is an art rather than just a business, which is why you'll hear people talking about things like writer's block, as if you ever heard of such a thing. Have you ever heard of carpenter's block, where a carpenter suddenly found himself unable to produce a chair that he was making? He had to stop and go off and have a holiday. I'm sure you haven't. Or what about builder's block, when a man laying bricks suddenly discovers that he can't go on anymore? This is all a load of nonsense. It's a business. Look at Fay Weldon, the famous author. Some viewers might remember Life and Loves of a She-Devil, which was on the television some years ago. That was Fay Weldon. She wrote wonderful novels, but before that she was in advertising, and it was she who coined the catchphrase years ago, "Go to work on an egg." Roald Dahl, of course, wrote children's books, but he also knocked out the screenplay for James Bond films. A writer can turn his hand to anything. Why do I like writing westerns? Here I must make something of a confession. I am an enthusiast for guns, and in Britain one can only really own and fool around with old guns, like this one, which is a Colt Navy 36 caliber. I use weapons like this a lot when I'm writing because holding it helps me to both get into character and also explore what is possible with a pistol of this kind and what is not. For example, rate of fire. In many westerns, and by that I mean books and films, People blaze away with their guns, and the mechanics of firing and loading are never taken into account. But just look at this revolver. It's called a cap and ball pistol. I'll explain why in a moment. It's single action, meaning that just squeezing the trigger like that won't do anything. You have to cock the piece first, like that. Do you see? It's a single action pistol. This has the effect of slowing down your shooting a bit. If you've got a double action pistol, you can just pull the trigger like that. With this, you have to cock, fire, and so on. That slows down how many shots you can get off. It's no point thinking about just standing there squeezing the trigger like crazy. Then too, it must be loaded with loose powder rather than brass cartridges. One pours the powder in here, you can see into the chambers there, and then you put a ball or wadding in. Now, I don't know whether viewers have ever wondered what this is. They might have seen on pistols in westerns. It's a ramrod. So, if I set my piece at half cock like this, I can turn the cylinder, so, and as I load one cylinder with powder and shot, I ram it like that. I tamp it down. Then you put little copper caps in these nipples. Each cap is coated with mercury fulminate, which is what sets off the gunpowder charge in the pistol. Now that takes quite a long time, and reloading a pistol like this, which is popular during the American Civil War, is a very slow and laborious process, which is why it's seldom described in books or shown in films. I keep this near me all the time when writing westerns, so that I can see whether some manoeuvre I'm describing is feasible, or a timescale during a gunfight makes sense. I suppose really that if I'm honest about it, I don't really regard writing as a proper job. I sometimes say to my wife of such and such an acquaintance, he or she has never had a proper job in their life. I've worked on farms and building sites and all sorts of labour like that, and that is what I regard as real work. This kind of thing, fooling around with words, is really a bit of a game.